Hello and welcome to the second season of the Living Legacy series from Of the I Sing American Heritage Through Song. It's hard to believe it's already been a year since this program began, and I am deeply grateful to all of you for your continued support of our nation's wonderful living composers. I am Audrey Johnson, founder and soloist for Of the I Sing, and a cornerstone of my company's mission of bringing American heritage to life through music is the support and championing of our living American composers, because they are the living legacy of our nation's musical heritage and culture. Today's guest is my dear friend Ronald William Hill. Ron was the very first composer to be featured on this series, so it seems only fitting to have him back as we embark on the second season. And to make today's episode even more special, I'm thrilled to be joined by my mentor and colleague, Bass-Baritone William Bill Powers, as we will be featuring 3 selections from Ron's stunning song cycle, Songs of Sac Prairie, set to texts by Wisconsin Poet Laureate August Derleth. As Bill and I will be performing this song cycle as part of a larger performance in Madison, Wisconsin next month. The timing couldn't be more perfect to share this music with you now. And we hope it piques your interest in attending our show, should you live in the vicinity, or additionally to viewing the program virtually. I'll fill you in with more details on both Ron and Bill, but before bringing them on, I'm excited to announce that I was able to secure some time to speak with Daniel Grabner, president of the August Derleth Society and the producer of our upcoming concert. No one can speak to Derleth's significance the way Dan does, and his vision for bringing Derleth's work to life is an inspiration. And I hope what he has to say makes you want to learn more about this wonderful American artist. Let's hear more about August Derleth now from Daniel Grabner. Well, Dan, welcome and thank you so much for your time within your busy schedule. I so appreciate you fitting us in, and it is just a pleasure to have you here today.
Audrey, thank you so much. I always treasure our time together. I'm so excited to see you, even if it's just a Zoom. You're up there with my favorite people. And so
Oh
I always love
gosh.
getting to
Well,
hang
that
out with
means the
you.
world. And likewise, I'm so excited that we are continuing to collaborate and that now with things continuing to open slowly but surely, that we're afforded the opportunity for, for more such performances, and we are taking advantage of every such opportunity. So this is just wonderful. And I'm so excited to really share the details of the programming that we have coming up so that anybody, if they are in the vicinity of Madison or not, can take part. But I think in order to really get across the importance and the significance behind the work that we're doing, I would really love for you to kind of first talk as, with your role as the president of the August Derleth Society, to really talk about August Derleth, just a little bit, a brief overview, who he was, why he was significant, maybe especially to, Wisconsin. Just fill us in a little bit about the history.
Sure, sure. Well, August Derleth was born in Sauk City. I believe it was in 1907, was the year that he was born. And he, at a pretty young age, decided that he wanted to be a writer. By the time he was, 14 or 15, he had started having stories that he would publish. Stories that he would write, published in magazines like Weird Tales, kind of horror pulp
Mm-hmm.
magazine
Mm-hmm.
is how he started off. And he joined a clique of writers that included Robert Bloch, who's also from Wisconsin, and H.P. Lovecraft, and Frank Belknap Long, Clark Ashton Smith, who would go on to write Conan the Barbarian, and was part of, right? Like these title in the, H.P. Lovecraft wrote the Cthulhu stories, and these guys were all kind of writing weird fiction, is what it was called at the time.
Yeah.
And at any rate, Derleth was prolific and hardworking.
Mm-hmm.
And during his lifetime, he published, while he was alive, he published 150 novels that were written that he wrote. By the time he was in his 20s, and so he had already been a writer a published money-making writer for some time, began working on what I think of as being his most important stretch of fiction, which he titled the Sac Prairie Saga, which was all about life growing up in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And immigrants coming into the state and people moving out of the state and the circus. And essentially it was a history of everything that had happened inside of the state, from the times where it was just the people of the First Nations, the Ho-Chunk tribe and the Potawatomi and the Sioux and the Iroquois. All these three groups had the Iroquois move in from the east, and so as the East Coast was getting taken over by white settlement, the Iroquois started to settle in Wisconsin, and they were unhappy and had become this kind of militant sort of group that was ready to defend themselves against other tribes, but also against the United States as it was beginning to expand. And the attitude at that time from tribes like the Ho-Chunk and the Potawatomi was that there's no, that they didn't see or feel a threat. They hadn't been displaced yet. And some of those early books included August Derleth having Native figures be the protagonists of the novels, which I really like. And so this kind of functions as the beginning of time for the series. And he continued writing it all the way up until 1971, when he died on the 4th of July, 1971. It was around the time he was in his 50s. He began writing what I like to refer to as the enlightened works of August Derleth. And there's and books like Walden West, which we are, is one of the major draws of material that we're using for our show, Walden West, comes from that, as well as some the cemetery poems, the In a Quiet Graveyard poems, which were all found after his death and published by the Society.
Well, let's turn our focus now to the specific performances that are coming up next month in Madison. So talk to us a little bit about, one of the wonderful things that the Society has been doing for years now annually has been the Walden West Festival, which is a wonderful celebration of Derleth's work in all of it, from the weird fiction to the more naturalist, material that we have been speaking about in terms of the Sac Prairie Saga and the song cycle. But all of that is beautifully intertwined in these annual festivals. So talk to us a little bit about that, Dan, and maybe how it's a little bit different this year. In years past, it's been in Sauk City, but it's going to be in Madison this year.
It's a full weekend this year, and so we've got our two shows, a double bill. Friday, October 15th, we're doing Walden West Fest as the first act, Walden West as the first act, and an evening with William Powers as the second act. On Saturday, we're opening up the museum so people can come and do our more traditional kind of show where we'll speak and let people look around at the books and the manuscripts. And on Sunday, we are going out to Blackhawk Island. Do I have a copy of the book? We do. Here. So Derleth wrote this wonderful book called The Ghost of Blackhawk Island. This is the first edition when he put it out.
That sounds like an absolutely wonderful weekend, and I'm so happy to hear that this festival is once again turned into this multi-day, multi-aspect celebration of Derleth, because he really is so singular in the way that he is such a huge force in that weird fiction, that science fiction horror kind of stuff, and things that we even see, today with some of the Marvel shows on Disney Plus. I mean, you see different things with Derleth. So, he played no small part in those things at all. And then also to have that naturalism and that, him being called the Thoreau of the Midwest. I mean, we have just such huge, distinctive, but equally, I would say, important and significant contributions to literature, especially in the Midwest. So
I think so too.
Great. Well, let's close by saying, I would think if I were somebody that could not go, that I would be very disappointed to have missed out. But luckily, at least the program that is happening on Friday night will also eventually be available virtually.
The live show takes place on October 15th. The on-demand version of the show goes live at 7 p.m. on October 16th and runs through October 29th.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. And we will absolutely keep everyone posted with links, respectively, for both the live and the virtual performances. But it's just very exciting, and hope that all of you have your interests piqued and are interested and excited about the shows as much as we are. So, Dan, thank you so much again for your time today. And I can't wait to see you in October.
I know. Well, thank you so much for having me on.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I'm so excited about getting to see you and the family and the whole Sac Prairie gang again.
Yeah, same here. It's going to be a wonderful reunion. So, all right, my friend. Well, thank you so much again. And for those of you watching, I will circle back now and give you a little bit more information about Ronald William Hill and William Powers
Oh,
before we bring on the rest of the Sac Prairie gang to finish out our interview for today. Thank you
give
guys so
the other
much.
guys hugs for me, please.
I will. I hope Dan's words inspire you to attend our upcoming performance, either virtually or in person, or at least to look up August Derleth and read some of his work. Here now to speak about the song cycle Songs of Sac Prairie is the composer himself, Ronald William Hill. Known for his poignant writing and sensitivity to both the setting of text and the singing voice, the work of Ronald William Hill has been championed by established international artists who find his music stunning, stimulating, and a joy to sing. Performances of his work have been featured by award-winning soloists and ensembles across the U.S., particularly at the Walden West Festival in Wisconsin, the Phillips in Washington, D.C., and on WFMT, Chicago's Jewel Box concert series, as well as throughout Europe. His work has received support from both the Illinois Council for the Arts and the San Filippo Foundation, and he was a recent finalist for the Ernst Bacon Award through the American Prize. As announced previously, we are also joined today by my dear colleague and mentor, Bass-Baritone William Powers. Since making his New York City debut in 1972, Chicagoan William Powers has performed over 100 operatic roles with the major opera companies and festivals around the world, including, among many others, the Metropolitan Opera in New York, the Chicago Lyric Opera, Cleveland Opera, and San Francisco Opera in the United States, the Spoleto Festival in Italy, the Opera Comique in Paris, the Klangbogen Festival of Vienna, and the Pablo Casals Festival of San Juan. He has also been a featured soloist of symphonic repertoire with the symphonies of Chicago, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Philadelphia, San Antonio, Los Angeles, and Dallas in the United States, as well as the symphonies of Paris, Cologne, Strasbourg, Prague, Bratislava, Hague, Amsterdam, and Vienna. While the stylistic range of his portrayals spans the gamut from Renaissance to contemporary, William Powers has earned an enviable reputation as a heavy, due in large part to the dark, penetrating color of his voice. Thus, the portrayal of rogues and villains has dominated his career. His teachers and mentors, George Lendon and Norman Traegle, have also added to the intensity of the acting aspect of his delivery, for which he has become well known. And he is especially infamous for his portrayals of Baron Scarpia in Puccini's Tosca, Mephistopheles in the Faust operas of both Gounod and Berlioz, and the four villains of Offenbach's Tales of Hoffmann. Please join me in welcoming my dear friends, composer Ronald William Hill and bass-baritone William Powers. Bill and Ron, my dear, dear friends, welcome. It is so wonderful to see both of you today.
Great to be here.
Pleasure to be here. Absolutely.
Thank you, Audrey.
Absolutely. I just, I love what technology is making possible these days. It's just fantastic. So, Bill, let's start with you. Ron has been a favorite on this series. This is, the third time that he's returning. And it's so wonderful that today we really have this unique angle with the addition of you, my dear friend and mentor, who, I just told everyone shared your amazing career and all of the wonderful highlights. You have sung with just about everyone, under the sun and at just about every major opera house that, that we have. So you have so much to teach us. We have so much to learn from you. I would love it if you would just briefly give us, just kind of as you reflect on all of the wonderful things that your career has had, what things stick with you, what has, really become what's been important about all of this for you.
Well, first off, I want to say that we, the fearsome threesome, you and Rana and myself, are having this fabulous opportunity, and I'd like to speak primarily about that, but in a quick nutshell. And I know that you've already given some of my credits previous to this conversation. I've been very lucky, and not everybody is. Just because you're talented doesn't mean you're going to get a shot. Luck plays a huge part. Who you know, where you are, if you're at the right spot at the right time. These all play a huge thing. But fortunately for plus 50 years, I've had an opportunity to sing everywhere and just about everything I've ever wanted to sing with some of the most influential and well-known singers in the world. And for me, that's a great accomplishment. But most recently, let me say, probably I'm going to say 4 years ago, and you can correct me on that, you introduced me to Ron's music, Ron Hill, wonderful, wonderful cycle on the Sac Prairie Saga, the Sac Prairie people, on the poetry of August Derleth. And at the first I thought, oh yeah, another composer writing another song. All right, okay. But, I took the opportunity because it was a possibility to do some singing in a period when there wasn't very much going on for me. And so this has just turned out to be a most remarkable thing. And it's so exciting to be a part of something that has actually proven to be a very, very worthwhile composition. Ron William Hill has taken this cycle of poems written by August Derleth, who is arguably known as the poet laureate of Wisconsin, talking about the people that he knew as a young boy, as he was growing up. And there might be 150 or 160 little poems about all these people. Ron has sorted through and selected some that are so touching, so magnificent. They really and truly, in my estimation, rival anything that the Schubert poet and Schumann poet and Brahms poet have ever put together. It's fabulous. And hopefully, if we can get this thing out there so people can hear it, it will be recognized as such. When we sang the initial set that you had created primarily for Audrey, and that I was then privileged to share, there was a character called Grampoloni. Grampoloni and I kind of are the same guy, all right? Grampoloni is an old man who is kind of living in the past and reminiscing all the time, and he's crusty and he's curmudgeon-y, but there's something about him that's attractive. And I think there's something about the poems about Grampoloni, of which in this cycle, In a Quiet Graveyard, written by Derleth, I believe there are 3 or 4 poems about this old character, Grampoloni. And after we did the first one, then you and I both kind of gravitated toward something called Grampoloni Gathering Grapes to Make Wine. And it is so poignant and so fabulous. And you have subsequently set it to music. We're going to hear it, I guess. I don't know if in this recording or not, but we're going to hear it when we perform in Madison next month in October at the Bartell Theater. And Ron, it's just such a masterpiece. I'm so privileged to be able to sing it, and I thank you for it.
Wow. Well, I appreciate that. It was a pleasure to know that it was going to someone who was going to sing it beautifully.
Well, it's a challenge. I mean, it takes everything I've got to try to bring out everything that you and Derleth have given me. Yeah.
I hope I wasn't necessarily mean to you.
You gave me some stretch now and again, but you know what? We need challenges in order to stay sharp.
Right.
And you know,
well, I'm glad you enjoy
that
it.
point with your music, if it's a challenging line, if it's a vocal line that I'm thinking, oh, I wish I had a third lung kind of a thing, or wow, that interval is no, or how do you want this glissando? But you're one that you never write arbitrarily just to do it. You write for singers, you write for your audience, and you're not one that writes for academia, if I may say so, in that way. And so for me, it is always a challenge I am willing to take on, because I understand that you serve the text because you serve the story. And so I never
Yes.
feel like I'm just, being used as a vocal workhorse. It is always, for a greater good. And I've always appreciated that about your music.
And Audrey, you and I are both singers who are as concerned about the dramatics of a piece as just standing up there and folding our hands beautifully on our breast and singing magnificently. Neither you or I are afraid to throw a line away if it makes more sense.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
absolutely true. And to that point about the drama, and thank you, Bill. That was a wonderful way to preview and hopefully garner some enticement and some interest for our upcoming performance next month. And yes, the Grandpa Loney pair of pieces that Ron has written, and now that really have become part of Bill's most personal deliveries, I feel. Today, actually, we are going to hear a piece, a selection that was recorded from each of us when we all met together in February to do some recording. And this piece could not be more different, I feel, than the Grandpa Loney pieces. This one is Anson Boggs, and he is the greedy, overzealous, money hungry farmer. And I would love to hear your approach. What I always just kind of assumed was, well, Bill has really made a name for himself as the villain character, right? The voice type just matched up with all of these things. And, so you have the Scarpia and the Mephistopheles and all of the villains in Tales of Hoffmann. And I just, to me, this is just kind of the agricultural equivalent, let's say, of some of those characters. Can you talk to us a little bit about your approach to Anson and maybe what some of those past characters have given to him?
Yes, and thank you for that fabulous introduction. I guess each of us who are singers approach a new piece in stages. Obviously, the stage number one is to learn the damn thing, all right? Just to be able to sing it, and then you need a period of time in order to let it settle into your voice, so that you have a sense of when to breathe or when not to breathe, or when to go into a head voice or not to go into a head voice. And then once all that is locked down, and it can take months, years, all right, then you begin to really delve into the inner workings of the piece so that you understand the poetry. Poetry is an attempt to say something that is otherwise undescribable. It's all metaphor. It's, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? What could be more beautiful in describing something? These poems by Derleth, who is an unknown poet to the majority of the reading public, there's depth in them that I don't want to say challenges Shakespeare, nothing does, but there's a depth in them that is so vital and so real, and it gets down into you. And then now that you have the mechanics of the piece locked in, now you can start shaping and forming the words into what it is that you're attempting to say and carry this across to your audience. Anson is not a villain. Anson is a man of a time when America had unlimited resources and unlimited possibility, and that anything you wanted, you did. Mark Twain said, if you want some oil, you dig a hole. And it comes out, all right? Well, we'll see how smart we are when you dig the hole and nothing comes out. All right, Anson was of the impression that you could farm and farm and farm, and it would keep giving you crops. And then the time comes when you've worn out the soil, and your habits, old habits, which weren't bad, they were just misguided, suddenly prove to be fatal. And suddenly Anson is planting crops and nothing's coming up, and he is knowing fear, failure, perhaps for the first time in his life. And he's frustrated because he doesn't know how to handle it. He doesn't remember when the Pilgrims came across in New England back in 1620, the Indians taught the Pilgrims plant a seed of corn and throw a dead fish in there and it's going to help. He never had that idea. And our modern day farmers, thank goodness, know that they have to rotate their crops and they have to fertilize, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anson came up in a time when that didn't happen. And so the poem itself is reflective of a period 100 years ago when we were ignorant. And there's a frustration. I don't want to say a villainy, Audrey. He's not a bad guy. He's just not an educated guy. And in that, it makes him interesting. We like to see fools fail.
Well said. Well, Bill, thank you. That was an incredibly meaningful experience for me to hear you and your process. And you're absolutely right. That makes complete sense. And see, I'm so glad that I asked you, because I was coming from it as, oh, this is, the Scarpia of the Midwest, or, because you get so, you certainly, all of the wonderful ways that you portray your villains, have that certain sense of, just digging in and biting in, and that's delicious kind
Audrey,
of a
the
way,
reason
so.
I know Scarpia so well is I've been singing him for 40 years.
Well, sure, there's that.
It's more than just singing, learning the notes. It maturates. It becomes something deep and insidious in a way.
Yes.
It's really quite wonderful to be around that long, to keep letting the thing grow.
Yeah, it's beautiful, those relationships we can have with the characters we play, and how they can inform,
Absolutely.
form us outside of that, and vice versa. That's amazing. Well, so Ron, give us, so we just heard, Bill give his reflections on his process overall, but certainly specifically to Anson. And I'd love to hear from you, your response to that, and your personal, relationship with that poem, Anson Boggs, why you chose it and why you said it the way that you did.
Well, when I was a kid, I remember growing up in the Midwest in the 1960s, there was a conservation poster contest every year. And conservation was a big thing at that time, because I think even into the 50s, there were places where soil was just being, gushed away in storms and whatnot, and people didn't create their land in a way that held the soil. Yeah. And as a result, you had areas that were now kind of semi-waste areas that should be producing. So that was a big thing, is conservation of the land. And we used to have to make conservation posters and all that sort of thing. So it's been in my mind for a long time. And I've always kind of had a attention on nature, and, Rachel Carson, I think, was that her name? Silent Spring and Silent Spring.
Rachel Carson. Right.
Yeah, and I took those things to heart. And I was in an ecology club in high school, that worked to clean up things and make things pretty again, when people were very wasteful with their plastic and their throwaways and their this and that's, and the countryside was being littered with junk. And we went out and picked up things, and it was something we had felt very, and we had that club because of a poem.
What?
And yes,
Great.
In a poetry class. It came from poetry class. The inspiration for it came from a poetry class. Wow. Anyway, all these things were kind of lining up for me in terms of Anson. Yeah. And I felt that there was something important there. And Bill, I think you're totally spot on that. It's a matter of, of the times and certain ignorance and no technology to handle, perhaps. And you went into a panic, and people under panic, do odd things. So, yes. Yeah. And, but it doesn't mean that the outcome is any less awful. Yeah. And, I thought the way that Derleth described it was just an amazing way. I'm not even sure, like, I'm looking at it now, I'm going, I don't recall exactly what it was, if there was any particular thing that got me, but I guess it was the final line, if anything. The final line, the final lines that just said, oh my God. It kind of summed it up into here was a consequence. And you kind of go, I guess Derleth's, writing as, in the different genres that he did in horror and science fiction and, this sort of thing.
Starved him.
Exactly.
Well, Ron, actually, and I love that story is amazing. And I had no idea the length of time that you had been living with those concepts. And then when you found that poem, how profoundly that must have spoken to you.
Absolutely.
But let's not keep our audience in further suspense. How about, I would love it if you would actually read the poem for us so that we can really grasp exactly what you are referring to before we hear Bill's rendition.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Anson Boggs by August Derleth. Lifelong, he thought first of hogs, cattle, sheep, but failed to think that cutting trees made less for them to drink in pond and brook. Anson Boggs cared for his creatures and his house, killed wild things, bird or mouse. If at first he prospered, he soon grew thin. He did not understand how man can kill his land. He worked it. He worked it before dawn, all morning, afternoon, sometimes at dusk. Yet every year his crops grew less, and he knew fear. He plowed from edge of long plowed hill to the plowed rim of neighboring wood, and starved the land until at last the land starved him. End of poem.
Yeah.
Great poem.
Yes.
Fabulous poem.
Yes, it is. Well, gentlemen, I am so honored to present to our audience your beautiful rendition of this piece, Anson Boggs.
Lifelong he thought first of hogs, cattle, sheep, but failed to think that cutting trees made less for them to drink in pond and brook. Anson Boggs cared for his creatures and his house, killed wild things, bird or mouse. If at first he prospered, he soon grew thin. He did not understand how man can kill his land. He worked it. He worked it. He worked it before dawn. All morning, all afternoon, sometimes at dusk, sometimes at dusk. Yet every year his crops grew less, and he knew fear. He plowed from edge along plowed field to the far rim of neighboring wood, and starved the land until at last the land starved him.
Will you blow me away every time? And that piece, my goodness, what a tour de force. Congratulations on a fabulous performance.
Thank you so much.
I
A
agree.
privilege.
Well, as we continue on, this journey of this cycle of vignettes, we were trying to give as much variety as we could today, and certainly that is not difficult to do with this piece. There's such a wide range, and so
Can we hear you now? We'd like
yes,
to hear you.
we will. Yes, definitely. So the piece that we will be sharing of my performance today is Froley, which is yes,
Good.
yes. So Ron, give us you and I have kind of talked about this as we've, corresponded with the interpretation, which has, led to musical decisions on both of our parts. But talk to us about, before any of us were around, you read this poem and it affected you in a way that produced this piece. So I'd love to hear about how that was.
Well, my father had a collection, I think 2 books of August Derleth poetry, as he had taken a class under August Derleth himself. And my father was a farmer, and he was there for what's called a farm short course in Madison, Wisconsin. And so he met Derleth and was, in this class with him. He considered this man rather sacred. You could tell he would, like, whenever his name ever came up in a paper or on radio or something like that, he'd perk up, and it's just like it was an important part of his life that he met this man. Anyway, I took one of these books of poetry that he kept in a file drawer, and one summer when I was bored and I was in my teens, and I was reading through these poems, and I found this one called Froley, and the first line it just grabbed me, and sunlight pools in his hot brown eyes. What a concept. It was just like, wow, I got it, and the rest of the poem went on from there. And to me, it was just a beautiful, beautiful poem, and inspired me. And I actually had my fingers on the piano, as I was reading it. And this set of 3 chords came out that was so unique. And I went, oh my God, I think I've experienced that, or somehow I felt like I translated that concept into music. I quick wrote down the chords, while I had them in mind, and knew that someday I would be following up on that. And I followed up a little bit, but never completed until decades later. Yeah. But what a concept, and then as the poem goes on, it's, there's a part, for instance, where it's about his dreams. Well, dreams are kind of a private thing, so I don't have the singer sing the dreams. As you know, that's the interlude that comes in the middle there, which is very important. What's more important than a person's dreams? You know what I mean? And I've always heard it orchestrally, and even while playing it in piano, I've kind of heard it, and then I had the fortune to be able to put it there orchestrally as well. And what a marvelous experience, but it's all because of Derleth's words and because of how he put that. It grabbed me so much. It's like right then I knew that I had something to do in life. I really did. I made the postulate that would be in my life. And I even had the idea that it would be possibly not until later in my life. It was funny. It was an exact idea that I had. And that exact idea has occurred. So anyway, to me, Derleth was an opening to my creative impulses. And it may not be everybody's cup of tea, other people find that in Shakespeare, other people find that in, whoever they like, contemporary wise or whatever, something will grab them and inspire them. Good for you. Please do it, create on it. It's a wonderful thing to do. It's what makes life worth living.
My goodness.
I hope I answered your question, but I think maybe I digressed into something else.
Certainly did in a very, very beautiful and very touching way. Yeah. Wow. And what a trust that you had in yourself and in your own artistry to just, you took down the pieces that came to you at that point, and you embraced the idea that this may be something that you would have to wait and to see to fruition. And I just have to say that I am honored to be part of that, Ron. And it's just incredible what you have created from these words. Could you actually, now we would love it if you would actually read the poem in its entirety for us.
All right, let me find it here. All right. And thank you, by the way, Audrey. You've given me lots of opportunity to be able to make this happen and show others. So I appreciate you.
Pleasure.
All right. Crowley. Sunlight pools in his hot brown eyes where he drowses on the hill to watch the summer going by. 14, he has no cares. He lies with sun warm in his eyes, gazes on the hawk that floats upon the blue above. 14, he disdains love, no heartache, he knows joy. 14, 5 feet of boy, he lies in summer sun, watching summer pass like a bull snake in the grass. 14.
That's lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And now Ron and I are delighted to present our rendition of Foley for all of you. I just love every opportunity that I have to sing that with you, and watching that video brings back such fond memories of our last time doing that. Thank you for that, Ron. Truly.
A lot of fond memories for me too. And that personally, Furley's, I don't know, it's personally my favorite somehow.
No, he's a special one, and
Or one of my favorites.
yeah, well, I know. How can you choose? I mean,
Yeah.
pick some of the most, have the most wonderful characters from this collection of derliths, but I can certainly understand it. I have to say, my little 20-month-old son, even now I see those little twinkles in his eye. I'm like, yeah, he is a little bull snake in the grass. So I say, it's coming.
He is that.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, this cycle, as I described in the introductions, is such a singular work in that it is the series of vignettes that is shared between two singers, but it's also bookended by, this prologue piece and epilogue piece. We actually heard the prologue piece during the December episode of the first season of this series last year, Snowy Night. And the cycle concludes with a beautiful, short but sweet reflective piece, a book of poems by Robert Frost, which is the name of the poem, not to be confused. This is an August Derleth poem. But Ron, talk to us about, this was not always a this was not always a duet. This was a solo selection at the beginning. So talk to us about, how you chose when you knew that Bill and I would be the ones singing this together, and how you chose to shape that into something that could conclude the cycle in this way.
I decided that this piece would be like, one of the two bookends, as I call them, at the beginning. So this is like the epilogue for the entire group of pieces, the entire cycle. And now that I had two singers, I mean, frankly, I felt like I didn't have a choice in a way. But what better way to end? It would be absolutely unthinkable to me, after doing a piece with two singers, not to let them both share in the final statement. I mean, actually, all of us are sharing the final statements.
Yes.
When it's done by an orchestra, the orchestra is sharing the final statement. Everyone, the conductor. I think it's a quiet piece as opposed to a big bang. Ta-da! Here we are. Blah, blah. That to me is not. That's not my concept of what the whole cycle is about. I like it to sink in after all the dramas of the individuals, and both singers sort of reflect on what this is about and what the lesson is. Maybe it's a bit didactic, but I think there's a certain lesson that people have various opportunities in life and so forth, and they might not take them, or they take some wrong direction or whatever. Anything can happen to anyone. And but this is kind of like, okay, here is a datum for you that you can use to organize your life. And perhaps something like a book of poems, might be the lighthouse for you,
Sure.
to keep you on the straight and narrow for your life. Not to be the moral, whatever. It's a moral compass. It is a compass. You know what I mean? But so, not that people are perfect in their behavior all the time and so forth, but the thing is, can you achieve your goals? Are you doing something that's going to give you richness in life? You know what I mean? And I think that by looking at the richness that others have put out in art and so forth, that gives you something to go for as well. It's always been what artists have done. So I think that's what I chose to do. And I go, how could I not give both singers the opportunity to, to do that? So I had, one line here, one line there. It wasn't rocket science particularly, but hopefully I did it in an artistic way that, it communicates well and so forth. And it's an interesting ending. It's not, like I say, it's not the big climactic ta-da, But it's a reflective thing. And I don't mind leaving people with reflection and quiet, and hopefully they feel good. You know what I mean? They can enjoy that moment of that they shared something that was, you know, personal to them. You know, maybe only one piece really spoke to them, you know, maybe some piece they found jarring, or some piece made them sad or something, but they have at least can go, that was my response. You know, it touched me. I had a response and I communicated with that, and somehow I feel duplicated by somebody else. You know, somebody understands me or what I might have experienced in life, which maybe was so personal I couldn't describe it to anyone, but somehow musically this happened. The connection it happened, and like it was almost like somebody understood them a little better.
Yes, that's beautiful. Bill, would you have anything to contribute to that?
Well, yes, and everything Ron has said is just so touching and so beautiful, and it comes from a very deep spiritual and intellectual concept, and is very altruistic. But let me say, in addition, whether Ron ever thought of this or not, coming from a commercial standpoint, most pieces that are written as duets are soprano tenor. And Ron, whether he did it intentionally or not, has given a mezzo soprano and a bass baritone something to hang their hats on, which I am eternally grateful for. And I think that every mezzo and bass baritone in the future will now have their own Winterreise in order to perform. Thank you, Ron.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Oh, I could not agree more. And what a wonderful way to close out. Gentlemen, what do you say? Ron, would you read the text for us of this poem? And I would love for us to then sign off, and we will end today's episode on that beautiful, poignant, introspective note of the duet.
Okay.
All right.
A Book of Poems by Robert Frost. Let me read that again. A Book of Poems by Robert Frost by August Derleth. Every man sets out upon his own, begins alone and ends alone. Even a point like Earth in space could be a dark and devious place, and a man might go astray for lack of signs along the way. In search of his own Walden, he could meet many inviting byways, many a primrose street, unless he had a guide to keep from getting lost. Thoreau, or A Book of Poems by Robert Frost.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Well, gentlemen, as always, it has just been a distinct pleasure to spend this time with you. Thank you so much for the gift of your company. And for those of you watching, this has been the Living Legacy series, and we sure hope you've enjoyed it. Take care.
Good night.
Thank you so much, Audrey.
Every man sets out upon his own, begins alone and ends alone.
Even a point like